Welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast for the quantum curious, where the only thing collapsing faster than a qubit is our free time trying to keep up with the news. Frank and Candice return from a brief, doctor-approved hiatus to take stock of the quantum ecosystem, which is now flush with unicorns, billion-dollar buyouts, and IBM's bold Starling ambitions. Spoiler: the timeline to a fault-tolerant quantum computer just got terrifyingly real. They reflect on how far the show's come, from physicists and founders to photons and post-quantum panic, and why your RSA encryption might already be on borrowed time. We touch on quantum tweezers, Canadian pride, and the global race to stay relevant in a world where the mainframe mindset is making a very cold, very superconducting comeback. So if you're still thinking quantum is decades away, darling, update your calendar.
Welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast for the quantum curious. And we took a week or two off due to a number of sidetracks that happened in our personal life. I had some health challenges, as did Candice, but we're all on the mend now. How's it going, Candice?
It's going great. Thank you so much for asking. And yeah, taking a beat and now coming back. I'm excited because it is a very exciting time.
The quantum news just keeps getting bigger and crazier, and like it just became like this. We do have other shows that are still in the can. We are going to get those out, but I thought it would be good after about 12 episodes to kind of take a beat. Now, fortunately, the universe thought of that idea. I can't say it was really our idea, but it forced us to kind of take a beat and kind of like see where we are. And I think we had a pretty good exploration of not just having quantum physicists on the calls, right, or on the show, but also kind of like what this looks like from a business perspective, from a student perspective, from an entrepreneur, from a startup founder, that sort of thing. We've had a pretty good smorgasbord sampling, I don't know what the word would be, of people that that really proved out our thesis, right? Our idea was like the quantum ecosystem is going to need everybody. It's going to be a village.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a village. And, when everyone gets to see what the other players are doing and thinking about and creating, I think that, it gets everybody excited in different ways. You're either competing or you're like, wait a second, I want to combine what's going on and work with certain other players to say, hey, why don't we create a solution that, combines the most, cutting edge hardware with significant software. And for example, that's what happened this week when IONQ decided to buy Oxford Ionics, for a $1 billion.
So, I mean, there are now quantum unicorns, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, there might have been before, but I mean, I think it's very cliche to say like we're on the cusp of something very big here.
But we kind of are. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why
it's still true though. It's
really
true though. It can be
ironic,
cliche, but true. I actually gave a talk at my team meeting, like internally in our AI team, talking about what the impact of quantum is going to be, in this space. And it was a lot of people very curious about it. So, it's something that I think is coming faster and more furiously than I think we anticipated. And to your point, you alluded to, like, there's a bunch of news this week, like a ridiculous amount of news.
Yeah, like it's absolutely crazy. I mean, you told me about IBM, which was like huge. And do you want to dig into that a little bit about Starling?
Yeah.
What said is that they have unveiled a path to build the world's first large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer, with a target of bringing the Starling system online by 2029. And that is an aggressive timeline, like we've seen really, I mean, all the major players keep on saying, it's going to be, 10 plus years from now. and until we really have something significant. And this is now putting it, within grasp of, of 4 to 5 years. That's really
within the
exciting, I
decade,
think.
within the
Right.
decade. And I don't think
Within the
people
decade.
realize, and this came up in my internal call at Red Hat was, you know, hey, is this something that I'm gonna have to worry about in my career? And then one guy in the call who has a history in cryptography kind of space, he's like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, if you had asked me this, say like November, I'd be like, it'll hit the 2030s, maybe 2040s, right? It may not affect you because, depending on your age, right? And where you are in your career. But after Willow kind of was announced
Right.
and the subsequent announcements, or, even before this week, I was like, yeah, it's gonna matter, right? It matters right now. Like if you're dealing out like SSL certificates and kind of PKI type stuff, you have to reissue your certificates with new types of encryption. Like you have to start now.
Oh,
Ideally, you would have started a year ago, but if you haven't started yet, you need to start now.
oh, absolutely. And now that IBM has also released like their, quantumized new timeline,
Right.
it's really exciting, talking about the Starling as, as a kind of the first stage in 2029, and then focusing on then the Blue Jay, hopefully in before 2035. And continuing to build the qubits, excuse me, the qubits, and really working on some of the major problems that you have when you're working in the quantum system, like we learned about error correction. And they did some breakthrough work emphasizing the use of something called a quantum low density parity check codes. And this apparently is the key enabler for fault tolerance. So it's super exciting when they also talk about the problems. So like out there, so like what's, oh my God, why this is working or why it's not, and being very honest about the real barriers that we have, in quantum computing.
Yeah, and I think that once you get past the error correction business, I think a lot more doors are going to open up. But also, there was a paper basically saying that Google researchers have proven that RSA can be broken with as little as a few thousand messy qubits.
Oh,
So
okay, right,
that was
okay.
like, and obviously, like some people said, oh, less than 1,000, but and there's a lot of hype. And then when you kind of peel back, well, maybe 10,000. But I mean, just the fact that some problems are not going to be that dependent on error correction being figured out than others, I think is also very telling, right? We're really in the early stage here, and the potential for disruption is going to happen. I think the only question is that going to happen in this decade, and I think probably, um, but it'll definitely hit in the next decade.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a definite, I don't know, there's like a definite shift to optimism that I haven't seen in this space in a very long time. I think 2019, 2018, that time frame was a bit of a false start. But then the
Okay.
pandemic happened, and then ChatGPT and generative AI kind of took all the oxygen out of the room in the hype
Right,
cycle. And I
right.
know like research doesn't really tie to the hype cycle directly, but it takes away a lot of venture capital money, right? It takes away a lot of attention and resources, that are very, I think, quantifiable, right? Whether it's VC money, whether it's, these top PhD researchers, are they trying to figure out what you're going to listen to next on Spotify, or are they working on a quantum computer, right? Like, I think,
Right. And also it's about that trust issue too, right? Like
right,
when something is evolving at like this supersonic rate that you're just not used to.
right,
And you can understand, if you're along that path, you understand why it's happening and why it's exciting. But to be able to explain that to other people is really the hardest part of it all, because it all comes down to the communication, really explaining, saying, this is why we're doing this, because this is what it can do. And we
right. That's
need
kind of our
that.
mission. Yeah.
Right.
is
And it's
to
all comes
encourage.
down to communication, constantly, and saying to people, be curious and want to understand this from wherever you come into it, right? If you're an academic, or you're on the C-suite of a new commercial venture, or you're just, in the middle, and it's exciting to you, but your job is not quite there yet, and you're wondering, maybe should you or can you, break in and start understanding why, what's going on with quantum computing is so incredibly exciting. And there's so many different things yet to explore. Like, we talked about all these different qubits on the show. And, there's so many different fields, at least I see, that you can come to it from. And it's a very exciting sector.
Well, yeah, and it's not just one type of system, right? There's photonics, there's trapped ions, there's cat qubits, there's typological, and I know I'm leaving some out. It's not just a simple. It's not like electronics where it's basically electrons, right? You're
Right.
putting electrons in these little like mouse mazes, effectively.
Right. Why don't you, like, you've explained it in terms of a transistor, when transistor radio came out, right? It just kind of changed how, within like the Industrial Revolution, and how it just changed how people thought about communication, and then brought us to, the analog computers, and we've been there for a very long time.
Mhm.
And and we've gotten comfortable, right? And yeah, with the accent of the mobility aspect, which makes it harder for older people, in our world, because it's just so much faster. And that's just harder, right? But we're on the cusp of something that is going to be a totally different mainframe mindset,
Well,
right?
yeah, I think for the foreseeable future, these quantum computers are probably going to be in the data center. They're probably going to be accessed like a mainframe was. You're not going to have a Q phone, right?
Mhm.
Um, at least not right away. And you're not probably not for a while. You're going to be able to go and order a QPU and drop it into your desktop PC, right? These are,
It sounds so cool. I love it.
I mean, I can't wait. But it's probably some time away for that'll be a thing. But I mean, in the meantime, I was talking to somebody who's also works at Red Hat, and again, this podcast is completely independent of that company, though I am very conscious that IBM owns Red Hat, and IBM is a massive player in the quantum space. They're probably in the lead, I would say, by a country mile. But I would also, I was talking to him, I showed him, like, you should probably look into it because he's kind of like curious about it. I encouraged him to look into it. And his first reaction was, wow, we're really just at the algorithmic level right now, right? So when you develop something in a quantum computer, you are really like down in the weeds, like in a low level. It's not like I can go and, you know, create a React native app in like Visual Studio Code or whatever, right? Like it's not, the frameworks aren't really there yet. Like the UI, that sort of thing. Like there's no pandas, there's no NumPy, like, you know what I mean? Like you are really kind of in exercises that you wouldn't really do unless you were taking introduction to computer science, right? You are really slinging the code at the algorithmic level, right? It's still very basic. I think that's going to change, but it's a time when you know traditional computers were also at that point where you needed electrical engineers and you needed vacuum tubes, you needed all these crazy things to just make them work. They had to be in a basement or like in a large building onto themselves. We're really at that phase here of quantum computing. And
Mhm.
it's not a stretch of the imagination to say, like, this will evolve just like traditional computers have. And we'll look back and we'll, in my case and your case, we telling our grandkids, I remember when the first quantum computer came out, it filled up a whole building and it needed liquid nitrogen to stake the coal. But you got, like, the new Apple Q Phone 26 and running iOS like 200 by then.
Right?
All these numbers are fresh in my head because the Apple Developer Conference was this week. So,
There you go.
um,
Okay.
and I know a lot of our guests that we've had and a lot of experts in the field kind of look down upon, quantum emulation. I think quantum emulation is going to be more of a thing than people will admit. But, again, it's so early. It's so early in the game. It's hard to say who's going to be right.
Right.
We talked to a photonics startup founder, and I was like, and I wasn't just buttering his bread, right? You know, I really think that, photonics is probably going to win as a foundational kind of, I don't want to say substrate, but like foundational layer. I think
Right.
it's going to win because it's probably going to be the first to hit like something closer to room temperature.
Okay.
I think. Now I could be wrong, right? And what's fascinating about this is every time I think I got a handle on how these systems work and how qubits work, I'm always learning something new. Like, oh, I was kind of wrong.
Like no, but seriously, I mean, and for me, from
Mhm.
where I first began to where I am now, and then remember there was some it was something that had come out from Caltech. Um, I believe it was like a week or two ago, and they talked about using like these tweezers, these qubit tweezers.
Oh yeah, you had sent like this thing. It was like a text message, and you were like, "You got to hear about these qubit tweezers or quantum tweezers," and I'm like, "Whoa, she's having a really pretty crazy fever dream."
But it's really, I mean, that it's so exciting, all the new technology that they're using and theoretical and now putting some things into practice, right?
Yeah.
Like the gentleman that we spoke to from Israel,
Mhm.
near Alfasi, and he's sitting in front of one of those kind of crazy rooms that you're talking about,
Right.
where their first kind of quantum computer, they're working from it, right? And people, I mean, using just quantum algorithms now, it's already in our world,
Right.
so
Well,
it's
so it's
exciting.
already if you're a CISO or chief information security officer or any, you know, you really need to take this threat seriously, right? And you know, the quantum night guys don't pay us, but
No.
but you really should look at what their solutions are because whether you use them or you use somebody else, if you're not moving your infrastructure today over to some kind of quantum safe encryption, you are going to be SOL as the acronym is when this does come out,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Right.
If not sooner, right? Because it's probably going to exist. I think it's safe to say that this will exist a bit like the Manhattan Project did, like in the 40s, right? Where,
Hmm.
it happened a couple of years before the public knew in general. So
Right.
if IBM is saying 2029,
Yeah,
it's
you should
not
be.
unreasonable to think that by 2026, which is next year, 6 months away, if you really want to be technical,
Right.
um, it's not out of the question to think that a state actor, whether it's one of, the good guys or the bad guys, and I realize this podcast is global, so, there's going to be your good guys are not going to be the same bad good guys as mine and vice versa, right?
Right. That's fair.
It's not unreasonable to think that this is, either about to go online or, in sometime in the next 12 months. And, moving all these certificates around is not a trivial lift. So like, seriously, like, for God's sake, do something about it. And it's also interesting that, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10 that they announced a few weeks ago at the big Red Hat conference, it supports, quantum safe encryption algorithms when you generate certificates, right? Like you should
Mm.
really start doing this like now, right? Like, because that's the thing that's really going to hit. I think it's going to impact people first, right? It's not going to be curing cancer or solving, climate issues or energy production or whatever. It's going to be, people are going to break your RSA encryption. I mean,
Right. They're
that's
just going to go for
that's
your data.
right, and that's going to be done at the nation state level, at the criminal level, and I mean,
Right.
go back and listen to the two episodes we have with the Quantum Nights guys because they're very interesting guys and very smart
Yes.
guys, and we'd
Very
love to have
smart.
them on again. But I mean, seriously, like if you're if you're in any kind of position of authority over any organization and you don't have a plan to migrate this, first thing you need to do is have a plan to mitigate this threat.
Yeah.
You
You need
know,
to make you need to make a call and get someone to consult for you and tell you
right,
really what's going on.
right. Because I think that's the thing that people need to, even if they're not in the quantum space, need to really upgrade their encryption tech to be resistant against this.
Yeah, we need some more of the encryption people, and we need some more photonics folks.
Right.
For what we're, going into the next part of our season.
Right.
That's for sure.
No, exactly. Exactly. Speaking of the next part of our season, we do have some episodes kind of, in the can, and we just have to edit and get them cut down. We'll get those out. And I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to have it's going to be an interesting year in quantum. I think it started off a little rough with Jensen kind of talking smack, but about the technology, and then that kind of hullabaloo, and then it really has bounced back with all these announcements and innovations.
Right. I think so. I think that it was kind of like a wet towel moment. And
Right.
those that were working on it were like, we're just not going to listen to that. We're going to
And
be
you
inspired.
said wet towel. I think you said wet towel moment. I'm like, is that some
Oh,
kind of
wet.
Canadian?
No,
Some
no.
kind of Canadian slang I don't know about?
I just felt that he kind of depressed people. And
He
made
did, but there were a lot of other people like, the best way if I wanted to buy a quantum company, like the best way to do that would be to like depress the quantum stocks, and then by saying something, and then I don't know. There's conspiracy theorists, I guess, around every corner.
Yes, but the truth is there's a lot going on that people don't understand. That's why
Why
you
we're
should
here.
join our mailing list.
Absolutely.
You should listen to the podcast. We are completely approachable. And we'd love to hear from you. So Frank, is there anything else that we want to say?
Have we formally announced to the show that we're like the number one, according to FeedSpot, number one rated quantum computing podcast out there?
That's right. That's true. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. I wish I had a little applause. We should have a little applause.
That's right. That's right. I
That
need to
that
set up my soundboard again.
Yeah, there we go. But
But
yeah, no, I'm super excited. I'm really happy to see what we believe to be true. That people are curious, people do want to understand, and people who understand and are in that world, are communicating what's exciting about what's going on.
yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that's great.
And I think it's such a, there's these rare moments in tech. They happen about once a decade. And I think quantum AI is currently, I think, the darling of the 2020s. .com was obviously the darling of the 90s. Probably social media, mobile, the 2000s and 2010s was probably cloud and big data.
Right.
But I really think quantum is going to be, the it girl of the 2030s.
Right. Well, I'm really excited about it. I'm
Awesome.
excited we're trying to learn about it, and we're doing it in a fun way.
Did you want to announce here that you have a State of Quantum in Canada report
Oh, that's right.
that folks could download from your
It's true.
profile?
I will be posting it
wherever?
shortly. I will be posting
Cool.
it shortly. Thank you, Frank, for reminding
Oh,
me
no
and telling the
problem.
audience. We're very excited.
Well, that's the other thing too. We've kind of discovered as we've been interviewing people, like this is a global phenomenon, right? It's like it's not just Silicon Valley, right? Or the West Coast of the United States, whether it's Seattle with Amazon, Microsoft, and I guess Vancouver as well with D-Wave and such. But I think this is a global phenomenon. We talked to people in Israel, we talked to people in Europe, we talked to people in the US, and there's obviously a lot of quantum activity in China, there's Singapore, Japan. This is
You talked to someone in Africa, remember?
In Africa, yeah. There's actually a quantum institute. I think it's either in Cairo or in Nairobi. So, I mean, this is a global phenomenon, and I think one of the perils of Silicon Valley is the fact that they are very geographically focused, and I think that makes you make assumptions, I think, based on your geography because it's your day-to-day experience. right? Whether it's, you're in Montreal, right? Like, and you were telling me what the kids do. They have boots and then they have inside shoes and
Hmm.
like that's a whole thing. And I vaguely remember my grandfather talking about that, whereas if you're in Florida, it's pretty much flip-flops year round, right?
Right. Right.
you know, and here like in, Baltimore-ish, there's we have all four seasons and each one of them is kind of aggressive. So, um, particularly the pollen this year, which was my
Oh, the pollen is crazy here this year. Like we actually had to wash off our air conditioning unit outside our house because
wow,
not enough air was getting through it with all the pollen that landed on it, right? Like,
wow,
oh yeah, it's crazy sauce. But you know what? Like you adapt. But I
right,
think what you're saying about the global interest is important. I think that Canada really wants to be Canadian strong
hmm
and not rely or be thought to as having to rely on other countries for cutting edge technology.
right,
And so it's very exciting that they kept on mentioning quantum, quantum, quantum over and over again at the G7.
yeah,
And and me, as you know, born American, New York born and bred, been living in Canada now for 15 years or so, dual citizen. But it made me really proud to see that, Canada was really stepping forward and showing that this is something that they want to focus their time and energy and resources on.
yeah. I think that's one of the last X number of years we've been focused on globalization this, globalization that, and globalization works well when everybody can hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But
Right?
the human history is not known for its moments of history where the world holds hands and sings Kumbaya,
Right.
right?
Partnership
Um,
is super important, don't get me wrong,
I'm not saying it
but
isn't, but like, a little bit of self-sufficiency never hurt anyone.
oh, 100%. Like when the, when the epidemic hit
Hmm
and everyone I was watching I literally was in Punta Cana on vacation for a first time vacation abroad with my children and my husband.
Nice.
And we were watching on the news how in China they were locking people in their rooms
Yeah.
because of this, uh, was soon to be COVID, right? And we were coming home back to, Montreal with that going on in the world. And it was very soon after that when everything kind of shut down. It was a
Yep.
very weird time. But I remember at that moment being really pissed that Canada didn't have the resource to make their own vaccine. And we were
Well, not
going
even
to,
not even vaccines, but like, Advil, there was like an Advil shortage or something like that, and a lot of other medicine shortages. I'm like, why? And it turns out that a lot of this stuff is made in India, in manufacturing plants in India. And when you shut down borders and you shut down all this stuff,
right?
suddenly you don't realize. I think what made a lot of people realize is how dependent we are on supply chains. So if there's any kind of conflict or whatever, or any kind of disruption, whether it's from a pandemic or hurricane or whatever, just how out of luck you'll be, SOL as it was, I said earlier, right? Like,
Right. Oh, 100%.
which was very alarming. I'm like, wait, you can't, who makes Advil, in the US? Like, and if you, and also too, like, recently, we're recording this in June and it wasn't but like 3-4 weeks ago that India and Pakistan had a actual shooting conflict,
Right.
right? And like,
Yeah.
really? Like, I mean, if that, God forbid that, thankfully that did not escalate,
Right.
but, it's
That's scary.
not hard to imagine if it did. And like,
That could very easily slip in the wrong direction.
a lot of things in the world right now could easily slip in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a miracle we made it this far.
Well,
But cooler heads tend to prevail every once in a while. And but in any case, like regardless of where you stand on, what country kicked off what or what started what, like doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong if you can't get the medicine you need,
right.
right? Or anything you need. Like it's just I don't know. Like I think, and I picked up a bottle of Advil like the other day at the store, and on the side it said it was manufactured, in India, and I was like, well, good for good for the Indian economy, but God forbid if it hits the fan again,
Right, right.
like have we learned nothing? And apparently no.
Well, yeah, because isn't the egg problem still happening in the States?
No, the egg problem is mostly abated.
Okay.
Like I got a big case of eggs the other day at like Costco or whatever, and
Right. Okay.
I didn't have to take a mortgage out or anything like that. And
We didn't have an egg problem here. Like we don't have as many varieties. That's like the deal, basically. To survive, you learn to accept not having so many of their varieties. Like I could never walk down an entire aisle at like the Stop and Shop,
Mhm.
and it would just be salad dressings.
Right.
They don't
Well,
have
a
variety.
lot of the egg shortage was because there was a small outbreak of some kind of bird flu.
Right, right.
So they had killed off a lot of. They kind of, you can argue that maybe they overdid it, but now that it's recovered so quickly, maybe it was the appropriate response.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But things like egg prices, though, well, are now they're very political, right? So like if there was another outbreak again, like will the decision be made on science or politics?
Mm.
I don't know. Usually if it's science versus politics, politics usually wins.
I was gonna say we've gotten very political here, but
No, I mean, like I think we did kind of veer a bit off topic, but that's what we do. But no, I mean, I can totally see why after the events the last, say 5-6 years, people have realized, look, love partnering with other countries, etc., but it's a good time to re-examine being self-sufficient.
I think it's important. I think it's
Yeah.
important to be able to, if you need to provide for your society. You need to
Right.
protect your society. But well, I don't want to be. I was just we can talk about the healthcare system, but I'm gonna stop myself right
Well,
there.
yeah,
Yeah, don't get me started. So, but no, this was great. I mean, really, there was so much that went on in the past couple weeks. I'm just
know.
happy that we got to take a little chance to talk.
And I'm glad we're both feeling well enough to chat again. And I thought this would be a good kind of point, and let us know in the comments or just through whatever feedback. If you think like a catch-up show every few weeks, because we did that in the beginning, or like maybe every 12 episodes or something like that. I don't know. Let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Cool. All right, with
Awesome.
that, we'll let Bailey finish the show.
ND, that's a wrap on this catch-up voyage through the ever-expanding quantum verse. If your classical brain is spinning, don't worry, you're in good company. Mine's distributed across several dimensions and still can't keep up. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review Impact Quantum, preferably with glowing praise, but we'll settle for constructive quantum criticism. Join our mailing list, send us your questions, or just shout into the void. With enough entanglement, we might actually hear you. We'll be back soon with more guests, more insights, and more proof that the future is arriving, whether you're ready or not. Until then, stay curious, stay entangled, and for heaven's sake update your encryption. Bailey, signing off.